Hello and welcome to our this lesson on C++ functions. Okay, so looking at what we have here, it says a function is a block of code which only runs when it is called. You can pass data known as parameters into a function. Functions are used to perform certain actions and they are important for reusing code. Define the code once and then you use it so many times. So let's look at how the syntax can be written in C++. Now you can see we have uh, void my function, and then the code we want to put in a function will come here. Now the explanation says my function is the name of the function. The void means that function does not have a return value and all that. Okay, so let's go to the code blocks and then we will look at how we can start writing some code. Okay, now first of all, I believe you have your note ready to be jotting some point down. Now function is any block of code that gets executed whenever it is called. Okay, so in programming it's possible that we will have to repeat some certain lines at so many places. So with this kind of issue, what happens is there's a particular principle in programming we call the dry principle. Don't repeat yourself. That is the dry principle. So dry, don't repeat yourself. So it's not a good practice to be repeating yourself throughout in your program. The best way is to have your code in a function, and wherever you need it, you just call that function and it sets in. Okay, so let's look at how function can be created. Now there's something we call return type. Return type, function name, round bracket, and then a body. So this is always the structure for creating a function. The return type, the function's name, you add your round bracket and then the curly bracket. Now this is very important. What's the meaning of the return type? Now sometimes there are some functions you expect them to give out some value at the end of the execution. So meaning it's a line of code you have, but you expect that that particular function should always give you a value. Okay, so if you are expecting the function to produce an outcome in the form of value for you, then you use what we call the return type there. Okay, so what are some of the possible return types that we can have in a function? They are the data types. We can have a return type of int, double, float. Can also have all of them, char, boolean, and even user defined types. Okay, so if a function is having a return type of int, it means that the function will give you integer at the end of the operation. If it's double, float, char, or boolean, if it's any of these, it means at the end of the function's execution, it's going to produce a value that will be of type as you have stated at the return type side. Okay, so now we are not going to look at these ones. Let's first have the understanding about what functions are, and then from there we'll look at the importance of using any of the types we have defined here. Then we have the last one we call the void. So the void type is just nothing. When we say void, it means nothing. So if you want the function to do some work for you, you don't want the function to maybe come up with any value but then just perform some action. If that is the case, then you use what we call the void. It means function, perform an action, but after you are done, sleep. Don't do anything. Don't give me anything. Okay, so void will come here, and then a function's name, it can be any name at all, but it has to be descriptive. Okay, the name of the function will have to be descriptive. So let me say hello. All right, now we have the return type and then we have the name. The rules in naming variables also apply here. If you add a space in between the say and then the hello, it's wrong. This is not going to execute. So it's supposed to always be together like you are seeing here. Okay, so this is the name of the function. This is the return type of the function. Okay, now within the body, you can see when I click here, it ends here, right? That's what we call the body of the function. So all the code you want to put into the function will have to be in between the curly bracket. Okay, now let me put this line there. Cout hello. Okay, now you are not limited to just one line. If in your function you want to put 50 lines of code, you can do. If you want to put 500 lines of code, you can. Okay, there's best practices when it comes to doing all these things, but for now, let's just permit that you can put any lines of code in there, at least just for us to understand it. So we have the say hello function here, and this hello function, we have a cout saying hello. Okay, so we have the function. Let's run the program and see the result. So the program is executed, but nothing is seen on the screen. Okay, you can see there's nothing seen here, and that's because I was expecting to see the hello that we have in this function, but we didn't see that. The main reason why this didn't happen is because when you create functions, they will never work unless you call them. So the lines of code you have within the function will never execute. They will only execute when you call them. So to call them, the best place to do that is inside the int main function. So you realize this one too is a function because the return type is what? Int. The name, ours is say hello, and this is main. The round bracket, the same thing here. The body, the same thing. As for the return 0, is there because of the return type being int. We will look at the other functions that has a valid type instead of the void. Okay, so let me call the function say hello. This is how we call a function. So calling a function, and then up here we call it what? Creating a function. One thing I want you to understand is in C++, a function cannot be created within another function. This is not done. A function cannot exist inside another function. So all functions are supposed to be standalone. This is one function. This is also another function. You realize they are not together, right? They are not, one is not within the other. Okay, always try and then create your functions above the int main. All right, so let's run the program now, and you can see we have hello on the screen, right? We have hello on the screen. Now this hello is coming straightforward from this function. We can change the output hello from this side. So now that the output is changed within the function, you can see if we execute, because the function is called in the main, hello from this side will be seen in the main. Okay, now with functions you don't have limited time. You don't have any limitation with calling them. You can call them countless times, like 1, 2, and then say hello 3 times. So you can see I've made 3 calls to the function. They are all going to produce what we have defined in the function. So hello world from this side is going to be outputted 3 times, 1, 2, and then the last one. You get it? So that is about function. When you create them, you have to call them before they execute. Okay, now let's say we are asked to create a function that will generate a number from 1 to 30. How do we do that? So void print 1 to 30. That's the name of the function. Now we looked at for loop previously, so we will use for loop for this. For loop, we want to start our counting from 1, and then our condition states that the loop should run as the loop should run as long as the I is less than or equal to 30, and then for each of the iteration we want to add a step of 1. Now for each step, make sure you display the I so we see the number. Okay, so that is the print 1 to 30 function. You realize my function name is descriptive. Anyone who sees this at least will understand that this function is going to print from 1 to what? 1 to 30. Now I'll come down here and then make another call to the same function. Now failing to call the function will render it useless. It will exist in your code, but there's no way it's going to work. It's going to work. So always when you create your function and you want the function to actually execute, or you want it to work, try and then make a call. And making a call to is supposed to be inside the int main. That is the entry point or the engine to the C++ application. So we execute now, and you can see we have the hello from this side. That is the 3 functions you see up here, right? And then down here, start from 1 all the way to what? 30. And this is also coming from the last function you are seeing here. Okay, so that is about functions. Okay, that is about functions. You see this line of code, we can put it here, and if we put it here too, it's going to be the same thing. Okay, but then the beauty of using function is now we only don't have access to the function just here in this file. We can create another file. There's something we call header file in C++. We can have functions in our header files and then use them across. So one function that is created here can be used in a different file too as well. And we don't need to be repeating ourselves. Each time in our program we want to print 1 to 30, we just call the function and it comes to what? Do the work for us. Now in an actual program you build, it's not going to be just common tasks like printing from 1 to 30 and then maybe saying hello. It's going to be maybe a function that will maybe create user password, or let's say a function that is responsible for generating usernames. Okay, so whenever a user is coming to register, the function will be called to generate the username for that particular user. Okay, so that's the beauty of using function. Always remember the return type will come first, the name of the function follows, and then your round bracket. When calling the function, you have to also add your round bracket. Failing to add a round bracket will make the function to not work. Okay, all right. Now so far so good. We have 2 functions. Let me create another function, but this time around we are going to use a valid type for the function. This is not going to be void, but a valid type. So let me come here and I'll say int calculate age. So year is equal to 2025 int birth year is equal to 1985. Okay, so this is a normal program we have. So we have our year to be current year, right? Let me make it current year. Current year is 2025, and then the birth year is 1985. Then how can we get the age? So age is simply the current year minus the birth year. Okay, and this is going to give us the age. Now after we have the age, we are going to use the return keyword and then age variable. So you can see, if you compare these two, if you compare the say hello function and then the calculate age function, they are not the same. The say hello function has a return type of void, and so it just performs an action or a task by displaying the information on the console screen, and then right after that was it. But looking at the function with return type, that is the integer, you see we have our lines here though, but at the end of the execution there is a return keyword and then what value is produced. So it's like you passing maybe some materials into a process or a machine, and then right after the process, the machine will give you some kind of output from the process, from the input. Okay, so this function is the same thing. When the function execute, is going to actually do some kind of calculation, and then right after it's done with the calculation, it will what? Produce the value of what was calculated. Okay, the result of the calculation will be what? Will be forced out of the function so it can be used. And so we have the int year, birth year, and then the current year, and we have calculated our age. So the value of age is stored in a what? Age variable. Now we have the return keyword and then the age. First of all, what's the return type? What is the data type for age? The data type of age is int. You realize this int matches the return type the function is having. So as a result, it is going to be valid for the function to return this age variable because it's having the same type. Okay, so what are we trying to establish here? Whenever a function is having a type, be it integer, double, float, that same type you have for the function is supposed to be the type of the value that will be what? Returned from the function. And your return keyword is supposed to be the last thing. So when the function sees the return keyword in the compiler sees the return keyword in the function, that is where it's going to end the execution for that particular function. So over here, we'll start the execution from this side and then end exactly here. Okay, so this is our age calculator function. Now let me just clear all of them here. Let me clear all of them. Calling function. So calculate age. Calculate age. Now we have the age calculated, but watch this. When I run the program, we will not get the output we are expecting. Okay, we are all expecting that at least this function, because it's returning a value, it should at least produce something, but this one will not produce anything on the screen. The main reason why you are not seeing anything is this particular function. You see, we don't have any cout inside. It's only the how do you call it? It's only the return keyword that is used. So after at the end of the calculation, the value is going to be returned from the function. It's like it's going to bring out a result. Let me put it like that. Okay, so we can say that int age is equal to the calculate age variable function. So what are we trying to establish here? The function will perform an action and then return a value. So in place of the calculate age here, it's going to represent a value, and that value the function is going to produce as a result of its task performing is going to be stored here. We can also make it result so that it doesn't confuse. The variable here is in the function, it's not the one we are trying to access down there. So int result is equal to calculate age, meaning whatever value that is coming from the calculate age variable should be stored in the result variable. So now we can do result and then you can see that the value is what? 40. Okay, so when you calculate when a function return a value, you need to store the value the function is returning in a variable, okay, before you can actually access it. So the calculate age is stored in a result variable, and now when we output, or when we output the result, we get the actual thing the user is trying to calculate. You can also do it straightforward, like cout calculate age and then end L. So putting the function straightforward in a cout will also give you the value of what the function is the value of what the function is producing. So you can see you have 40 here. Okay, 40 here. Now again, let's look at one last function. So int, this one I'll give it a return type of double. Calculate price. So to calculate the price, what do we need? We first need the quantity. of the product. So let's say the quantity is 2, and then the price, the unit price of the product is 3.5. Okay, so with this, the cost, the total cost is going to be the quantity now. After we are done, we say return total cost. So with this function is also performing another task. Now the function will simply, it will know that we have the quantity of 2 and the unit price of 3.5, and then we are doing the calculation, finding the total cost here. Now right after the calculation is done, you can see we are returning the total cost from the function. So total cost is being returned from the function. That means function, perform your duty, but after you are done, the result you get, make it available outside. Make it in such a way that we can access it outside. The same way the age is calculating the age, and at the same time, after it's done with its calculation, producing it out, that is the same thing this one is doing. But remember, you see we have return type double. Check the type of the data we are outputting. We are returning total cost. You can see it's also having the double type. Okay, now if we do a build and we check, you can see there's no error. How about I do something like this? Hello. You can see there's an error here because we've indicated that we want the function to return a value that will be double, and this time around you are returning hello in inverted commas. That means in double quote, meaning it's a string, so the function will not work. So it's appropriate to always correspond the return type to the type of value you return from your function. So now that it's double and then double, we refresh and then you can see the error is away, it's gone. Okay, all right, then this one to the same. To access this function, we can either create a double variable and then call it, let's say, cost is equal to the calculate price, and then right after we are done, you can say that the cost, or you can straightforward call your calculate price function in the cout before you can get the value. Okay, so the truth of the matter is, if the function is having a return type, no need to use the cout inside. Don't use the cout. Okay, it's not advisable. So if the function is going to calculate something and then give you a result, or it's going to produce a value, just return that value straightforward. Don't use cout in it. Okay, if you want to use cout, then it makes sense to change it to void, like the ones you can see up here. These are all void functions, so we are using the cout in them. But then with the int, the double, that's the function with the return type, it makes sense to actually put the functions implementation there straightforward, and then you can omit the return type. You get it? You can omit the the cout inside. You can omit the cout inside. It doesn't mean if you add the cout it's wrong. It's not wrong to add the cout, but you just need to actually do it that way. Okay, so that you be at the safer side. Then we go to the second function, to the same thing. Realize it's just producing an output. So over here we are saying that double cost. You know why this one is double? That's because the function is also producing a value of type double. So cost is equal to calculate price. That will be the function. So whatever value this function produces, that is what we are storing in the cost variable. So if it's producing 10, then the cost will be 10. If it's producing 50, cost is also going to be what? 50. And then when we finish, to get the value or to make it visible to see, we put the cost variable we stored the function's output in. We call it in the cout here. So this is one way to get the result, or you can just use cout and then call the function straightforward in it. These two, any of them can give you or can get you the actual value the function is is returning. Now for now, don't think too much. Don't try to ask yourself too much questions like why is this thing function. For now, understand it like this and then go with the flow. There are so many things, it really makes sense after we are done covering a lot of concept. Okay, so for functions, just keep in mind they are block of code that gets executed whenever it is called. So if I remove the code we have here in the int main and then I run the program, you realize even though we have functions there, but then nothing is seen on the console screen. That's the nature of functions. When you have them, you are supposed to always call them before they what? Before they execute. So now that we've called the functions here, if I call them again, you realize they are going to what? They are going to execute, and some kind of values are now seen in a console screen. Okay, and we have two types. Basically, a function that doesn't return anything, and then a function that returns. So we looked at the int function, we look at the double function. That's a function returning what? Double. You can also try and then create function that return string, boolean, float, char, any of them. The only thing is you make sure the return type you put here will match the type of the value you return from the function. That is the only thing. Okay, so thank you so much for the time. I'll see you in the next lecture where we are going to look at what we call the parameters and then argument. Bye.